I enjoy playing around with AI and the ChatGPT interface. So I asked AI, where should I begin if I was a new fantasy fiction reader? The suggestions? Great and horrible. Let's take a look. Welcome to Fantasy for the Ages, the show where a father and son talk about fantasy, science fiction, and other nerdy things we enjoy. I'm Jim, the father, alone solo here today. A quick take episode where I'm talking about these recommendations from artificial intelligence for a new fantasy fiction reader. If you enjoy what I have to share today, show me, hit that like button, and if you haven't subscribed yet, we hope you will. Zach and I have all sorts of fun content here on the channel. Take some time and explore. Now, I am a fan of artificial intelligence. I appreciate all the big and small ways it's improving the quality of our lives. Sure, there are some ethical issues out there with the use of AI. I'm not arguing that. I'm not trying to change people's minds. But overall, I do think the good outweighs the bad. I expect that I will feel that way until Skynet sends Terminator units to destroy all of our lives, but I think we're still a little ways away from that, so I'm going to continue to enjoy what AI brings to the table. One thing I have found AI useful for is making suggestions when I'm looking for ideas on a specific topic. For example, I gave ChatGPT my wife's interests and preferences last December and basically said, give me some Christmas gift ideas. We've been married 35 years. I'm like, what new thing can I think of? Well, AI did a brilliant job. I got a list of like 10 things, and she got at least 5 of the things off that list. She liked them, particularly that very nice Kindle Paperwhite reader. So today, I asked ChatGPT for its book suggestions for a new fantasy fiction reader. Its answers are not bad, but also not great in some ways. It gave 7 suggestions, and here are my thoughts on each of them. First, and these are not ranked or any way, these are just 7 suggestions. And the first one up was The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, a delightful introduction to Tolkien's Middle Earth. Okay, sure, it's hard to dispute a recommendation for Tolkien. And the perfect place to begin Tolkien is The Hobbit. As a former teacher, I did a voluntary lunchtime book club with my 5th graders for a Hobbit read through, and they loved it. Some became lifelong fantasy fiction readers, greatly inspired by this experience with The Hobbit. Like this guy, pictured here when I ran into him most recently at Jordan Con. But at the same time, The Hobbit, its style, it's a bit old school, overly verbose at times, and it can turn off the casual reader. I think the risk is greater with The Lord of the Rings than it is with The Hobbit, but the risk is still there. So for this suggestion, I'll give it a score of 8 out of 10. Number 2, the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. Perfect for both young and adult readers, it's a magical world of wizards and adventure. Those quotes that I'm giving, that's straight from ChatGPT. And this one, I have no argument. The Harry Potter series is a brilliant suggestion. The only potential issue in the statement that, perfect for young and adult readers, honestly, some adult readers may find these books, especially the first few, a little too young or young focused. But for most readers, I don't think this would be an issue. In coming to appreciate what fantasy fiction is all about, Rowling's Harry Potter series is not at all a bad place to begin. I will give this one a 10 out of 10 recommendation. Number 3, A Song of Ice and Fire series by George R.R. Martin. Known for its complex characters and political intrigue in a medieval fantasy setting. Yeah, and its violence, its deaths, its darkness and depravity. This is a harsh one to dive into if you're just exploring fantasy fiction for the first time. I'd only recommend A Song of Ice and Fire to a new fantasy fiction reader if I know they'd watched and loved the HBO adaptation Game of Thrones. Although, if they really loved the ending of that series, I'd be questioning their overall judgment. An undeniable issue with this series is its grimdark focus. I love grimdark, but this subgenre is definitely not for everyone. My wife now enjoys some fantasy fiction, but she would hate these books. You need to be careful about recommending this series. Really kind of gauge the preferences, the leanings of the person you're talking to, though I hope they don't truly lean grim dark. And then there's the other unpleasant element of fantasy fiction that A Song of Ice and Fire introduces a reader to: the unfinished, left us hanging series trope. We've been waiting well over a decade for book 6 of this excellent series. I have no problems with The Song of Ice and Fire. I love these books. But, George, where's book 6? And there's supposed to be a final book 7 to follow after it. The lack of these books is a point of frustration for any fantasy fans who've read these books. Why bring a new reader into this issue? So, just 6 out of 10 for this recommendation. Number 4, The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. A beautifully written story about a gifted young magician. This one I completely disagree with. We're really talking about the King Killer Chronicle here, and Rothfuss, while he is a fantastic writer, he's quite different in his style compared to most other fantasy authors. If you start with Rothfuss, you may be disappointed at much of what else there is to find to read. You're not going to find a lot like the King Killer Chronicle. Another point, the King Killer Chronicle is also a little quirky in its writing conventions, particularly with primarily being written in a storytelling flashback style. When it works for you, you're all in. Yeah, this is great. But some people will not connect with this approach. Oddly enough, when I read the books and the novellas, I really enjoy them. But the longer it's been since I picked them up, the less I miss them. That says something. Of course, the final issue with this suggestion is the same as for A Song of Ice and Fire. The trilogy remains unfinished, now for over 13 years. I won't do this to someone who's new to fantasy, so just 5 out of 10 for this recommendation. Number 5, the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson, known for its unique magic system and intricate plot. Here's another recommendation in which I can find no fault. I've recommended Mistborn myself as gateway fantasy, a perfect entry into the genre. As a bonus, it's a nice door into Sanderson's Cosmere. If you really enjoy Mistborn, you have plenty more in a similar style to explore. Yes, good suggestion, AI. 10 out of 10. Number 6, the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan, completed by Brandon Sanderson. A vast, epic fantasy series with rich world building and memorable characters. Yes! This is such a good, well-balanced, comprehensive epic fantasy. The only challenge here is its length. I mean, 15 books, most of which are nearly 1,000 pages in hardcover. That's a big ask for a reader new to fantasy. I know it works sometimes. It worked for my wife. And if a reader falls in love with the first couple of books, they have made a friend for life in the fantasy genre. Heck, some readers barely need to read anything else. They just stay in a continuous loop of Wheel of Time rereads. I see you out there. That's not such a bad place to hang out. So I think this rec is worth the risk. I give it a 9 out of 10 rating, and the 9 just because of that commitment issue of a 15-book series. Finally, number 7, The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, a classic series that blends fantasy and Christian allegory. There are pros and cons to this recommendation, and I think it's fine for many new readers. It was written for children. That's specifically C.S. Lewis's intent. So while it's rich in fantasy content, world building, magic, creative characters, it remains quite approachable for those new to fantasy. The primary challenge of this series is that it is, a deliberate Christian allegory at the core of the tale. For me, a Christian, that only makes it better, but not everyone will feel that way. I understand that. Now, I don't think you need to agree with Christian beliefs to enjoy and appreciate the Chronicles of Narnia. But if you have a negative perspective on Christianity for some reason, it may diminish your enjoyment of this series. So, recommending this series will depend deeply on the person you are recommending to. By the way, if you have negative feelings about Christianity, I'm sorry about that. It suggests to me you've had encounters with the wrong types of Christians. They tend to be the ones that make the news. We're not all like that. I hope you have better experiences down the road. So, this series, my score is a 7 out of 10. A saving grace of ChatGPT's suggestions is its final disclaimer. These books cover a range of styles and themes within fantasy fiction, so you can explore what resonates with you the most. In short, ChatGPT is saying, try these and see what works for you. It's hard to argue that point. The suggestions indeed cover a wide variety of fantasy types and styles. What would I change out? My biggest change would be to swap out the King Killer Chronicle for Jim Butcher's The Dresden Files. Very approachable urban fantasy. Short novels, a light, fun tone in the initial books as it draws you deeper into the series. Of course, it's unfinished, but Jim Butcher is at least still actively writing it. We are not questioning whether or not it will finish. I am not trying to say the Dresden Files are on the same level of prose writing skill as the King Killer Chronicle, but I think they give you a very different feel, much easier for a new fantasy fiction reader, and distinctly different than the other 6 recommendations. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. We'll talk to you next time.